Hello, my name is Fauzia Shah. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Today, I would like to talk to you about the difference between the conditioned self and the unconditioned self. Let's get started. I hear a lot from my clients about having so much anxiety and feeling very depressed. And a lot of times they don't understand why they feel so much anxiety and how do they stop feeling so much anxiety. What's the difference between the conditioned self and the unconditioned self? And how you're really supposed to be rather than not you're supposed to be. What do I mean by the conditioned self? What I mean by that is that the conditioned self is based on narratives, constructs, concepts, and labeling. So it's actually the information that is collected through the conditioned mind, which is based on cultural values, global values, family values, social values, and things that you pick up in school. So these are, you're collecting this information, you're collecting this data, and it is, you start to create these narratives, and some of the narratives are passed down through the generation, and so they become our narratives, and we start to identify with those. So the narratives, constructs, concepts, and then labeling. Okay, and that is part of the human self. That is what the ego is comprised of. That's what the ego does. Ego actually lives only in the past or in the future. It does not live in the present. It absolutely cannot live in the present because the self is what lives in the present. And self is you. It's the state of consciousness, it's awareness. And that is who you are. And that's how you're supposed to live. So coming back to the conditioned self. And so when the ego is functioning in the past and in the future, you're going to tend to have a lot of anxiety. And people that actually have obsessive compulsive thinking, and they think, and from one thinking, another thinking comes, and another narrative comes, and another narrative comes, and it becomes just so overwhelming that they just don't know what to do. And sometimes they end up doing things that are not very healthy for them, like overeating, like eating disorders, like shopping, spending money that they shouldn't have spent, gambling, and even addiction issues. And that's because we are actually living through these narratives and constructs and concepts and labeling. And so when there's a situation that we experience, the ego labels it, but the self experiences it. So the unconditioned self is actually does not live through any narratives or any constructs or any labeling. It just is. And it actually is comprised of love, peace, happiness, contentment, and joy. And that's it. So there's no judgment. When you're living through the self, you have no judgment because it's not made up that way. The judgments come from the ego. That's the conditioned self. That's how we end up judging ourselves, and we end up judging others. And when we judge others, we judge ourselves. And when we judge ourselves, we judge others. It's just as simple. It's just simple. We also identify with our thoughts. We also identify with our feelings. And that's all coming from the conditioned self and not through the unconditioned. So when people have anxiety and they have this depression, they have to really stop and actually start practicing mindful meditation, yoga, being in the present. Through their breathing, they can actually learn or bring their attention to the breathing, to the air as it goes down, and they should stay with that and release it back. And also, observing what kind of thoughts are being produced, but just observing them. You don't have to actually identify with that or take them as seriously. You can just say, those are just thoughts, and just let it go. So it's very, very important that mindfulness is used as a vehicle to become aware of you. So, I often hear people saying, well, I do mindfulness and then I'm present and then I'll go back to, my thinking. And, I just want to make very clear that mindfulness is not, I've done this and okay, now, but I'm still not in the present. Well, you have to practice being in the present. And here are some of the things that I would highly recommend practicing so you can become aware of you versus the conditioned self. So when you're washing your hands, and this is all coming from Eckhart Tolle, so I definitely want to give him credit for this because I have learned a lot from his teachings. So when you wash your hands, observe the water and the soap and keep your attention on that. But when you start to think about that process, you're in your head. You're actually now in the ego. But when you're observing it and that's all you're doing and you're actually experiencing that water, the one that's observing that is you. So when you're walking, for example, and you take one step and the next step and you stay right with it, one step, second step, you're right there with it. The one that's observing is you. And the one that is going to think about it is the ego. So one that's observing is you. And when you are actually observing it, you will come to recognize that I am. Whereas the difference between the ego is, I am a doctor. I am a this. I am that. I need this. I want that. I should have this. Why it's like this? It shouldn't be like this. So all these thoughts are actually coming out of the ego because the ego tends to be, I want this. I need this. So it's all about I. Whereas that's all the self says is I am. In other words, I exist. And that's it. And then another exercise that I've talked about in another video of mine, and that is about grounding or earthing, going outside barefooted and standing on the ground, experiencing the earth, touching your feet, but keeping your attention on that, or observing the process of the feet and the ground touching. And the one that's observing it is you. The ones that are thinking about it is the ego. So remember that. So whenever you're thinking, so the human is the thinker and the self is the observer. Being still and being quiet and just being one with everything around you is also a process that is very helpful in you becoming aware of yourself. No thought is required. So the difference between the self, the unconditioned, and the conditioned is that one is the thinker, one is the observer. If you found this video to be helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell icon, and so we can notify you on all the new videos that are being posted. Thank you and take care of yourself. Wishing you the best.